Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry for the light. One of my light bulbs has blown out, but it is Tuesday, November 6th, Election Day here, uh, and I'm here to answer Heather's question about online uh, growth or growth in online teaching. And I've had an interesting experience because I have taught a class that was predominantly online. There was offline portions uh, here at the university, and that was in Chem 232, uh, the first semester of organic chemistry. And the way it was set up was uh, all of the material that they would need for uh, all of their notes and coursework was online. All of the quizzes were online, and for the first semester, their exams were online as well. But most of them would have to come to the university to use a computer and be proctored in person. So on top of that, there was a bit of an on-campus portion that dealt with uh, discussion groups in which I was a TA for. So I would sit in a lecture hall, and in essence, if there are any questions, I would be there to answer them, and I would also go through some of the lecture notes that was done in the past week or the day. Um, Also, all the TAs were required to uh, take time and spend time on the site that was hosting all of this content because they could ask questions on the site about various points about the content, and we needed to be able to answer them within a reasonable amount of time. So that was an interesting uh, course that I had TA'd for, and it highlights some of the issues that Heather has talked about, in which we try and either incorporate what we know works with brick and mortar courses into the online environment, or we have to learn through trial and error the proper way or the most efficient way to take advantage of the online environment. And we haven't really figured that out, and sometimes we do, or we can swing wildly back and forth. Uh, we had issues with the online exams, so we just scrapped those for the spring semester, and we ended up doing paper exams where we sat down in lecture halls and they filled out scantrons, and that was a pretty rough on everyone because it was contrary to everything else that we'd done in the course up until that point. So that was that's an interesting story, kind of highlighting the issues that could come from online uh, online education. Mainly, it's the fact that there's so much unknown and there's so little that people can work off of that is tried and true. And obviously, there's very differing tried and true methods for various subjects. Um, that said, one of the places where I could definitely see such an invaluable use to distance learning, online learning, would be in remote areas. Now, we're in Illinois. There are remote areas. I've seen them. I've been to a couple of the smaller areas in Illinois, and it is a slightly inconvenient drive to get to any place of significant population from some of these places. So I can see how distance learning here would be great. But I lived in Montana for 4 years. That takes it to a whole another level. You can drive for 4 or 5 hours and not run into anything of merit. Maybe a town of 10 people. Those exist. And those towns of 10 people will have people or have children that they end up having to move across the state to go to college. But maybe their parents want to also uh, uh, freshen up on some courses pertinent to their jobs in that town of 10. I mean, there is definitely this great uh, potential for a lot of these remote areas in our country to really, really uh, benefit from being able to have the same material at their fingertips without having to, if not temporarily, permanently move from one part of from where they are now to a place in which there's a university. it was while I was out in Montana that I became very aware of the fact that the satellite programs, how most universities have a main campus and they have multiple campuses around the state for state institutions, how it made a lot of sense, especially in Montana. They're all scattered. Very few are near each other by virtue of the fact that there's no major cities really near each other, but also to try and facilitate students from the more remote parts of the state to be able to access locally education. And I know that the main campus, Montana State, is, I believe, looking into distance learning in some way, shape, or form. They don't really have, if I remember correctly, they don't have a lot of funding for it, but there is definitely interest, as I said, due to the large nature of the state and the inconvenience of getting from one point of the state to the other. So that's kind of my take on online education. There's definitely room to grow, and there's definitely potential, and it can be an excellent resource if it's properly executed. And I hope that we figure out the best way to go about studying proper and effective teaching methods through the internet. With that, I hope to have a new light bulb next week. Have a good night.